Hello, my name is Francesca Dumitrescu, and I'm a student at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. The University of Illinois is in central Illinois, and despite the joke that it's surrounded by cornfields, it's actually a very diverse campus. People come here from all over the United States and from all over the world from 126 other countries. According to the university website, there are over 30,000 undergraduate students and over 20,000 graduate students for a campus population of over 50,000, and that's not even including faculty and staff. With so many students, there are so many paths of academic study. But of course, this level of diversity would indicate a diverse political population as well. According to a partner study done between the University of Texas Austin and Trinity College Dublin that measured the effect of university and attendance on political values in Romania, there is a strong link between higher education and culturally liberal views. In general, there is a sense that higher education contributes to more progressive viewpoints, but there have also been arguments made that while higher education provides opportunities for students to be more politically engaged, that doesn't always necessarily mean that they will lean right or left. So what does this look like at the University of Illinois? In this video, we'll be looking at what political participation and partisanship looks like on the campus of the University of Illinois. Not only will we have some conversations with U of I students, but I also had a conversation with Professor Scott Althouse, a professor of political science and communication at the university, as well as the director of the Klein Center for Social Research. Not only did I want to look at people who are actively involved in the university, but I also wanted to look beyond the campus and look at the community surrounding it, the Champaign-Urbana community. Within Champaign-Urbana, I had a conversation with some people who are involved with Braver Angels, an organization that is committed to bridging the gap between right and left-leaning political participants. So with these conversations, I aim to see what it kind of looks like beyond campus, because there is this kind of push and pull between how the campus affects the community around it and how the community around it affects the campus. I personally am really curious to see how partisanship, as well as kind of media in itself on campus, kind of interact and manifest in students' lives, and I hope that we can find this out together. Now let's dig into this deeper and see what U of I students have to say about the political climate on campus.
So do you see that there's like a political balance or imbalance on campus?
I mean, I do agree that there is a little bit more of a left-leaning thing, but I think that is, again, because of the generational. Typically, the older you get, the more conservative you tend to lean, and the younger you are, typically the more liberal or left you tend to lean. More probably liberal, probably the right word. I feel like, though, that's just kind of how it is, and since this is mainly a demographic of 18 to 22-year-olds, it's going to typically lean towards the generational trends.
I haven't noticed much of anything on campus. I think we're a pretty liberal campus from what I've heard.
So, like most college campuses, it seems to be mostly liberal, which is, I mean, that works fine with me because I am on the left-leaning side. But it does have lots of sparks of right-wing, which makes me very uncomfortable. But given we're in the middle of nowhere in Illinois, that doesn't really surprise me.
Do you think there's a lot of opportunities for people to pursue political activities?
Absolutely, yeah. I know they have a club here somewhere, but the university makes it a very accessible to engage in any voting or any political things. So whenever it comes up around that time, I know they have a lot of options for us.
There's, tons of RSOs especially.
Are you involved in any of
Yeah, I'm in Amnesty International, which is nonpartisan, apolitical, but human rights related. So that means I've worked with a lot of politically and just activism oriented RSOs on campus.
Besides just student life on campus, there are also various organizations that provide opportunities for people to be directly involved in politics. Besides just the Illini Student Council and the University of Illinois Student Council and the political board that comes with that, there's also registered student organizations such as Young Americans for Freedom, Young Americans for Liberty, Young Democratic Socialists of America, and Illini Dems, aka Illini Democrats, and Illini Republicans. While of course there are numerous organizations that are directly affiliated with political parties and ideologies, such as Illini Democrats and Illini Republicans, there are also organizations on campus that are not directly affiliated with any ideology, but because of certain social perceptions, they are perceived to be leaning one way or another. For example, Planned Parenthood Generation Action is considered a more liberal-leaning club, while the Turning Point USA Club at UIUC is considered more conservative.
The partisan groups, meaning Illini Dems and Illini Republicans, seem to be a smaller population rather than groups that are just like activism based on like a certain issue or just broadly political. So I think people really want to get involved in activism, but I don't think that always necessarily manifests itself in like partisanship on campus, but I could be wrong.
Everyone has a responsibility, not just the organizations themselves, but like every single one of us to like engage in like healthy dialogue. And yeah, it's like we're living in times where it's like everything like afraid of doing the wrong thing, and yeah, I think like collectively I think we can all like work towards like having healthy or like conversations. And yeah,
I feel like I know a decent amount of people on like both sides of the line, and I feel like I'm honestly impressed by how able people are to get along despite different political upbringings and like opinions. And I think something that's really cool is the way that people are really passionate about their political beliefs. But no, I think it's really cool how people are really passionate about their political beliefs, and like I really admire like the activism here on campus and the way that like people I think are really figuring out for themselves what they believe and are standing up for it.
Now I'd like to look into more of what Professor Scott Althouse has to say about the relationship between media and politics, as well as what it looks like at U of I.
In your own words, can you describe the relationship between politics and media?
The relationship between politics and media is a very tangled one. So citizens need to learn about what their governmental representatives are doing in order to hold them accountable, and need to have a way to make their views known to those governing institutions so that those institutions can respond to what they're hearing. And communication is important in both of those directions. One of the challenges with politics today is that the way that communication happens is technologically very different than in the past, and that also brings challenges of having a wider range of information that is flowing in both directions. That brings some special problems for making government work well.
And in the past 10 years or so, would you say that this relationship has changed or fundamentally has stayed the same?
So definitely looking over the past 10 years, past 20 years, I can look past 40 years. There have been incremental changes in the media ecosystem in the United States that have definitely set us up and contributed to some of the challenges that we have in politics today. But one of the biggest developments was the advent of social media technologies in the early 2000s that, as they began to gain popularity, really reshaped the relationship between audiences and professional journalists and the politicians that they're talking to.
Can you describe the current political environment in our UIUC community and like the Champaign community?
So the political environment locally here in Champaign-Urbana is really a cross-section for what we see in the state of Illinois. We have a mix of political perspectives, some of them held very strongly, and yet one thing that is kind of distinctive about the political culture of Illinois is that it has historically been a somewhat moderate political culture. And unfortunately, that sometimes manifests in political leaders who are willing to take a bribe, and that's a way to sort of make things go. But the plus side of that is that we have more potential than in some states around the country right now for people to really listen across lines of difference and try to seek the common good before just seeking, what's best for their team or their tribe or their party.
But how do you think UIUC handles partisanship on campus?
The University of Illinois has a very diverse range of political perspectives represented in our classrooms. And when those classrooms are welcoming to all points on the political spectrum, we have an opportunity to have vibrant conversations across lines of difference that are really hard to have in other places and other spaces. So we have a lot of potential to be innovators in the ability to listen across lines of difference and to find common solutions together. But the University of Illinois, like so many other spaces, is really challenged right now by the deep polarization in our party politics. And if we can find a way to navigate through that, I think we're going to be helping future generations of leaders to be well positioned to work out the public's interest in the best possible ways.
To round out this video, I spoke with some Champaign Braver Angels Alliance members. Braver Angels is an organization where an increasingly polarized nation works across the country to really provide spaces for people across the political spectrum to get together and communicate and listen to each other. So I spoke to some of these members to see what it really means to create meaningful conversations and what that looks like for our community. How do you think local media affects partisanship in this community?
I think local media, and I'm going to separate them a little bit. The paper media, I think, is a very balanced presentation of the news. However, the people on the left will say it's too right, people on the right will say it's too left, and the editor will say he can't win. So it's a real challenge. However, I think if you look at it objectively, the paper presents both sides. And unfortunately, that is a little bit of it's a lot of a challenge for the paper, and then also for the people who are very far right or very far left. They have lost trust in the local media because it's not saying what they want to hear. So I do believe the local paper media is the subscribers tend to be more in the middle. That the people the paper used to be more far right, and it's shifted a little bit under the new editor, and I think some of the far right people left, and then the far left people, it's not left enough. So it's a challenge locally.
Why do you think it's important to facilitate conversations between people across the political spectrum?
Well, I think of it as really as a civic responsibility as an American, because this whole democracy thing, for it to work, I think we need to have that kind of interchange, and that's why I got involved. Really, I was frightened by the amount of rancor and division that I was seeing in our country, and also I think it's just beyond the fact that it's scary and hard for government to function. I found it saddening. Mm-hmm. Saddening that people were that dug in and sort of angry and fighting.
So what does it mean to listen to people in this community?
For diversity of opinion or a diversity of understanding the community, then it would mean being willing to look at very many different resources and sources to get different angles and views throughout the whole community. We are a very divided community, and we do not now have the diversity of newspapers that we once had. You weren't here when we had so many papers, but we were a very fortunate community when the university student newspaper, the DI, was fantastic. We had the Courier, and we still have the News Gazette, and that literally gave us a three-legged stool of how things were presented to us as community members, so we could look at all three and get a balanced view of what is happening, not only in the elected officials, but appointed boards and at the university and other things that are happening in our community. That does not exist at all anymore. and that it makes it very hard for us to know what is happening in the community. We have all this whatever, like Facebook, etc., but that tends to be very siloed and very biased without a governor on it, so then we get a slice of all the different possible ways of looking at things. And the division between the north end of our community and the south end of our community is quite dramatic. It was officially that way with redlining, now it's unofficially that way, and there is a wonderful website called eBlack that does help us get a better handle on the north end of our community, but very few people know that it exists, and therefore go and look at it so we can learn the history of what went on in our community, laying the groundwork for where we are presently. The potential in this community is so overwhelmingly great. With the university here, all of the smart people in our community, and it could be the model community in the state of Illinois for the like-sized community. But we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. You can come.
As we get to the end of this video, I want to share what I've learned while going through this project and making this video. I don't think there's necessarily a single takeaway that's to be had, but I do think it is important that in our current times to recognize just how crucial it is to really be a part of these conversations and be a part of meaningful conversations. And in terms of what this looks like in the University of Illinois, and as a current student, what my current perspective is on it is there's so many opportunities, whether it's through staff support, through colleagues, through students and peers, to really be involved in ways that feel right, whether that means being directly involved in clubs that are directly affiliated with some sort of ideology, or being part of organizations that work towards human rights or other issues. There's just so many ways that people can be in spaces where we listen to each other, and in spaces of higher education, I think that's even more true. And while I don't know if it's necessarily important to label the University of Illinois as leaning one way or the other politically, I do think it's most important that we maintain these spaces where people can be involved and can participate and can listen to each other, because at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to who we are listening to and what conversations we're having. At the end of the day, that's how we can make progress. The university is its own culture, and I think it's very important that students kind of take part in this culture in one way or the other. Of course, there's other subcultures, but there's a lot to be done on this campus, and there's a lot of space for students to do things on this campus, and that can have a lot of impact. I'd like to thank Professor Scott Althouse for being in this video, as well as overseeing this project as a whole. I'd also like to thank Chuck Stone, the Braver Angels Illinois co-coordinator, for sitting down with me and having a conversation about what Braver Angels is and what it could look like collaborating with Braver Angels for this project. And of course, I would love to thank the Champaign Braver Angels Alliance and the members who are part of this video. It was absolutely lovely going to an Alliance meeting, and I had a great time. I thought it was a great space for conversation. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned a little bit about this from this video, whether it was about the University of Illinois or the importance of having a meaningful conversation. I certainly learned a lot from making this video, and I very thoroughly enjoyed it. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next project.